So recently I received a call from a beginner poultry farmer. Her birds were very, very, very sick and they were dying massively. She was completely stressed. She didn't know what to do. This farmer is keeping broilers. And since I also don't specialize in broiler production, I also had limited knowledge on what I could really share with her. But I asked her, have you had a vet come to the farm to examine the birds and give you a proper diagnosis? To be honest, her answer really surprised me. She said no, but she was giving her birds garlic, ginger, and then later switched to aloe vera. And in my mind, I'm like, wait, you've invested over 5 million into this because this farmer was keeping 500 broilers. But you're hesitating to spend 50,000, even if it's 100,000, on a vet who is going to give you proper diagnosis for your flock. Anyway, to cut the long story short, I had to visit her farm with my vet, of course. And by the time we reached her farm, this farmer had lost over 100 birds. Over 100 birds. For me, that was very, very heartbreaking. Because first of all, this was her very first project. Her very first project into poultry, 500 broilers. And she is making these very huge losses. And then secondly, her birds were not dying because they were really, really sick, but she was giving treatments without a proper diagnosis, like without knowing the cause or the sickness, but she's giving this treatment. That experience has inspired today's video. I want us to really have a very honest discussion about herbal remedies and also charcoal, because I've realized charcoal has also become increasingly popular among very many poultry farmers. Can herbal remedies and charcoal be helpful in poultry farming? The answer is yes. But can they be very dangerous for your flock if you give them as a substitute for the right treatment, or if you give them without regulation? They can be very dangerous. In today's video, I want to really explain when should herbal remedies apply in poultry farming and when they shouldn't. So if you want to keep your flock productive and healthy, stay with me till the end. I welcome you back to the channel, and if you're seeing me for the very first time, my name is Flavia. I'm a poultry farmer who shares practical knowledge about poultry farming.
Morning comes too early, hands already warm, working for a better day, trying to keep me warm. Boss man count his tally, we just count our time. Fair don't.
Now, before we talk about the charcoal, let's first talk about the herbal remedies, the herbs. With herbs, I mean things like aloe vera, ginger, garlic, moringa, cannabis, and so much more. But I've mentioned only those because I know they are very popular among poultry farmers here in Uganda. I've also used herbs in the past, especially aloe vera. When I had smaller numbers on the farm, I could use aloe vera on some occasions, and I would really understand why very many farmers would opt to use herbs. First of all, herbs are very cheap. If you're to compare them with the drugs that we buy in vet shops, herbs are cheap. They are readily available. I have aloe vera planted all over my farm, around my farm, so herbs are really readily available. And then the information regarding herbal remedies has been passed down to us by experienced farmers. On very many occasions, you'll hear experienced farmers tell you, use aloe vera to support the immunity of the birds. Use moringa to stimulate the appetite. And honestly, I think these herbs genuinely do work in most of the occasions. And then another reason why very many farmers opt to use herbs instead of calling these vets around is because we have very many self-made vets who just gamble on our farm. You know, when you call a vet on your farm, you're not going to ask for a vet their documents, their education documents. As long as someone has just a little knowledge about poultry, they will come and just gamble. I'll give an example. I've had a boy who has worked for me on the farm before. He recently called me. He's in the village, and I asked him, "What are you doing in the village?" He said, "I'm now working as a vet." And I was really shocked because this person was on the farm for only 2 years. And those 2 years he was on the farm, we didn't even have any really, really severe outbreak on the farm. And you're using that experience on other people's farms. Like literally the experience you have is about farm routines, but you don't know how to manage diseases. You don't, like, you didn't go to school to study this, but you're on other people's farms and you're gambling as a vet. So that's why very many farmers, when they see that these vets are gambling around, they choose to use herbal remedies. And honestly speaking, on many occasions, these herbal remedies really do work because, first of all, they support immunity. For the aloe vera, I can testify because I've used it in the past and I know that it really supports immunity. When you're using it in a very regulated way, your birds don't fall sick as often. And the moringa stimulates appetite in sick birds. Even the cannabis stimulates appetite. In the past, when I had a Gomboro outbreak, after administering the liver tonic, the glucose, the vitamins, my birds were still weak. They didn't have appetite. And an experienced farmer told me that you give them cannabis and you'll see. So I mixed cannabis for them. And honestly, they picked up. They started eating. They regained their strength. So I know for sure that herbal remedies, they do support immunity of the birds. They stimulate appetite. They support digestion. Most of them provide antioxidants for these birds. But don't get me wrong, supportive is not curative. I don't know if you get my point, but herbal remedies provide healing, but then they don't cure the disease. They heal the symptoms. Like if you're to give your birds herbal, for example, aloe vera, when they have a fever, you'll realize that your birds will regain that strength a bit, but you've not treated the sickness. I don't know if you get my point. You've not treated the sickness itself, but you have treated the symptom. So herbal remedies really do support, but they don't cure. They heal, but they don't cure. I'm going to explain further when it comes to herbal remedies. First of all, herbal remedies don't tell you the disease you're treating. On very many occasions, I've seen farmers who use only herbal remedies. They don't know what they are treating. Most of them always think they are treating a fever. But there are very many diseases in poultry farming. There is Newcastle, coccidiosis, typhoid, etc., etc., etc. When you use herbal, you will not know what you're treating because, first of all, herbal is going to mask off all the symptoms. Like I told you, it heals. So it heals, but it doesn't cure. So it's going to mask off all those symptoms, and you will not know what you're treating exactly. And in some occasions, actually many occasions, herbal does not cure the viral infections. It also does not really cure the bacterial infections. It doesn't stop the parasites from spreading. Herbal remedies don't replace vaccines. When we visited that lady who had a problem on her farm, the one who's keeping broilers, my vet told me something still, because this lady mentioned that she was using herbal. My vet told me that in the past she visited a lady who also, her birds were very, very sick. He tried to find out the sickness of the birds, but he failed. This lady was not giving him all the information that he needed to find out the sickness. But later, farmers, we don't like really exposing ourselves or telling vets facts. We want them to work on their own and find solutions. But later the lady told my vet that she had not vaccinated typhoid. Typhoid is a bit expensive. She told my vet that someone had given her herbal medicine to replace the what? To replace the vaccine. That instead of buying the actual vaccine, she should use herbal. That herbal will work, and she'll never see typhoid attacking the birds. Long story short, those birds were very sick from the same typhoid. So herbal can't replace vaccines at all. Imagine if your birds have coccidiosis. Instead of treating them with the correct anti-cox drug, you give them only herbs. Every hour, the parasites will just continue damaging the intestines. Another example I can give you is if it's a bacterial infection, the bacteria will continue multiplying while you're hoping that the herbs will work. Honestly speaking, herbs, herbs don't stop parasites from moving. They don't cure those bacteria infections, the viral infections. They only support. So we should really give herbs, first of all, when your birds are not sick, but you're trying to support their immunity. And also you should do it with a lot of wisdom, like regulate it, because if you overuse them also, so they stress the birds. So you should regulate at least in a month. Maybe you can give them that herbal remedy 3 days. 3 days is actually enough, because they will support the immunity, they will improve the digestion, the appetite, but they don't treat. So you can give herbal if your birds are not really sick, but you just want to support them, you just want to keep them healthy. That's when you should use herbal. But the moment you realize that your birds are sick, herbal is not what you should run to. Now, the next section I want us to talk about charcoal. I understand why very many farmers choose to use charcoal, because, well, it may have its benefits. First of all, it may absorb certain toxins, and it's also not too expensive. And also some farmers argue that it helps them with coccidiosis. But this is something that very many farmers don't know. When charcoal is inside the digestive tract of a bird, it doesn't choose what to absorb. It might absorb antibiotics, it might absorb vitamins, electrolytes, all the good things, it will absorb them. So if your birds are sick and then they have charcoal in their feed, charcoal might actually absorb that whatever medication you're giving them, and you'll think, I'm treating my birds, but they are not healing. Still, my vet told me something about charcoal. He visited a farm. The birds were very sick, extremely sick, but he gave the birds the proper medication. But the birds were not recovering from the sickness. They gave a second medication, the birds were still not recovering. So he was very confused. And when he checked the feed store, because he says, if I fail to see the problem inside the poultry house, the next thing is I'll check the feed store. When he checked the feed store, he realized this feed had charcoal. Now, if you're giving your birds medication in water, and then the feed has charcoal, charcoal is going to absorb all that medication, because for it sees it as poison. It will absorb it, and then your birds are not going to get these antibiotics. You will be spending a lot of money buying the medicine, but charcoal is absorbing the what? The medicine. I hope you get my point. Secondly, another thing about charcoal, why I wouldn't recommend charcoal. Usually when birds are sick, the first thing that I personally do before I even call a vet is I'll go to the poultry house and look at the color of the chicken dropping, because usually the color of the chicken dropping can tell you the disease that your birds are suffering from. Now imagine if you have charcoal in your feed, even if in your water, charcoal changes the color of the chicken dropping. Usually it will maybe be black. So if your birds are suffering from coccidiosis, you will not see the brown chicken dropping. You'll be seeing something black, and you'll think your birds don't have coccidiosis, because this charcoal has changed the color of the chicken dropping. So it interferes with proper medication. It interferes with proper diagnosis of sick birds, because first of all, it changes the color of the chicken dropping. So you're not going to be able to tell the sickness that your birds are suffering from. Then it absorbs everything. Yes, it does absorb the toxins. If your feed has toxins, it does absorb the toxins, but it also absorbs the good things. It will absorb the vitamins. It will absorb any medication that you're giving your birds. That's why I wouldn't actually encourage someone to be using charcoal on their farm. So frequent use of charcoal will reduce nutrient absorption. Even if you're mixing your feed well, your feed has electrolytes, it has vitamins, it has all these good things. Charcoal is going to absorb some of those nutrients, and you'll see your birds are not in great production, yet you're feeding them with the right yet you're feeding them with the right feed, but then you're adding something which is absorbing all these good things. It also doesn't treat infections. Some people argue that it treats coccidiosis. Well, I'll beg to differ, because I know with coccidiosis, even if you give charcoal, it doesn't stop the parasites from moving around. What charcoal does is it will change the color of the chicken droppings. So what should a farmer do when they realize that their birds are sick? Step number one is for you to observe the symptoms. Even if you cannot tell the symptoms clearly. For me here on the farm, what I do is on day one, once I realize that my birds are not active as they should be, they are not running to the feeders. If I get inside, they are isolating themselves, they're not running towards me, they're not completing their feed. Day one, I'll give liver tonic, because liver tonic puts out all these other symptoms that are hiding. And on day two, I'm able to tell that, yeah, now they are really sick. Probably they are coughing. Probably they are weak. All that. And after that, step number two is I'll separate the sick birds and I'll put them in a sick bay. All the weak birds, we shall feed them manually. We shall have to give them water manually, because they are weak to drink or to even eat. And then step number three is I'll call a vet. When a vet comes, a vet is going to give a proper diagnosis. Then we shall start treatment. I will only use herbs to support. In fact, I'll use herbs when my birds are completely okay, but now I'm supporting them like through their recovery. I'll encourage one to use herbs. But then again, if you have very big numbers, how are you going to know the right dosage for aloe vera, the right dose for ginger or garlic? So if you've started commercial poultry farming and you really have big numbers, you have a limited chance for you to use herbal remedies, because how are you really going to know the right dose that you're giving your birds? And then, as poultry farmers, our first responsibility is to give our birds the best chances of surviving, not the cheapest chances to survive. Have you been using charcoal or herbal remedies? Please comment down below in the comment section. I would really love to hear your experience. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one. May the good Lord bless you. Bye-bye.